Ever wonder about those church signs in spring talking about fasting, meat, and those crosses on foreheads? If you're a Christian who doesn't keep this advertised celebration, you might have wondered, what's all this about? Am I supposed to be doing something? This is Lent. Let's talk about it. Lent comes from an old word meaning spring, which just tells you when it takes place, so nothing too crazy here. It's actually a really old tradition that might even go back to the early church fathers. Irenaeus, who lived between 130 and 203 AD, spoke about Lent and said, variation in observance did not originate in our own day, but very much earlier in the time of our forefathers. It's a 40-day period of fasting, starting with Ash Wednesday, and people who practice this have a lot of different customs and traditions, but there are a few customs that they all have in common. One custom is a cross made of ash on the forehead. This is supposed to be a symbol of humility. They also fast from one meal per day during Lent and Ash Wednesday.
Okay, who's got food in here?
With no meat eaten on Fridays.
I'm hungry.
This is supposed to be a sign of respect for the flesh of Jesus. Some just find something important in their lives that they use often or maybe a little too much, and they give it up for 40 days. And this symbol is representative of submission and rededication to God. So, it's an ancient tradition designed to honor Jesus Christ for enduring in the wilderness, fasting for 40 days, and rejecting the temptations of Satan. In that case, why don't all Christians keep Lent? I can't speak for everyone, but there are several reasons why I don't practice Lent. For one, it's too associated with the Roman Catholic Church. While it's an old tradition that predates Roman Catholicism, it has changed a lot in its current form because of the Catholic Church. And while I would never avoid biblical practices just because people I disagree with practice them, Lent and Ash Wednesday are never commanded or even mentioned in the Bible. Second, the symbols aren't accurate. The black cross they draw on their forehead draws more attention than represents humility. Jesus tells us when we fast, we do it for God and not to be seen by men. Also, we're not meant to abstain from the sacrifice of Jesus Christ out of respect, we're meant to partake of it. So when they stop eating meat out of respect for what Jesus Christ did, it doesn't follow what Jesus Christ told them to do by partaking of the bread and the wine, symbolic of his body and his blood. Also during Lent, special attention is given to Friday, out of respect for the day that Jesus died. But he didn't die on Friday. Fasting. The Bible doesn't have precise rules on fasting, but it's clear that it deals in the abstaining from food and drink to humble yourself, not choosing for ourselves what we want to get rid of and hoping that it honors God. Third, it shifts our focus away from what God asks. There are so many things that God actively asks us to do that we don't practice. Why then, when we leave so much of his commandments undone, do we find it so important to add things to it? We create this vacuum by ignoring God's commands and then try to fill it again with the ways we would like to worship him, rather than what God asks of us. This was the problem with ancient Israel. They would proclaim fasts for themselves that God hadn't asked for, and then believe themselves to be righteous. But God's hope for them was that through obedience to his commands, they would learn greater truths like justice and mercy, rather than feel justified in the actions themselves. There are a lot of well-meaning people who keep Lent and Ash Wednesday fully believing they are honoring God. And I don't want to impute motive to people with good hearts. But I do want to remind you that it's really easy to deceive ourselves into doing the wrong things for well-intentioned reasons. It's always better to focus on the path to goodness that God outlines clearly in his word, rather than forging our own path and hoping it leads to the same place. Thanks for watching Magnified. If you found our content helpful, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. We really appreciate your support.